Hopefully we're going to have a good night tonight as we join in some singing and as I am able to share my testimony. I shared some time ago that I've been asking people to give their testimonies and you're finally at the bottom of the barrel. And so I decided I would do mine tonight. So we'll do that in a few minutes. Robbie, will you pray for us and then we'll go ahead and sing a couple more songs and then we'll be on.
Come, Christians, join to sing. Let's stand together as we sing. Come, Christians, join to sing. Alleluia, amen. Loud praise to Christ our King. What's the page? I'll wing it. Okay, we'll do it that way. I must have left the first one out. Hi, everybody. I would call it a technical difficulty, but I believe I forgot to put a slide in. I'm going to play too. Thank you. I'll come to the end of my journey, and I'll meet the one who gave his life for me.
10,000 years will just be started. 10,000 years we've just begun. The battle's over and the victory's been won. 10,000 years we've just begun. We will just begin to sing love's sweet story. It's a song that the angels cannot sing. I'm redeemed by the blood of the Savior, and 10,000 years or more I'll praise His name. 10,000 years will just be started. 10,000 years we've just begun. The battle's over and the victory's been won. 10,000 years and we've just begun. 10,000 years will just be started. 10,000 years we've just begun. The battle's over and the victory's been won. 10,000 years and we've just begun. Search me, O God, and know my heart today. Try me, O Savior, know my
appreciate you coming tonight. I am both honored and humbled since I forewarned you what I plan to do tonight. There's a passage in Scripture where God tells Israel that he did not choose them because they were the strongest, mightiest, most gifted, most talented nation, but God simply chose to set his love on them. I think that's my life summed up. For whatever reason, God chose to set his love on me, and I believe he has from the beginning. And so I'm going to violate most of the laws of giving testimonies, and I want to go back to the beginning. And what I want to talk about is encounters that I've had with God. Some I was aware of and some I was not. Some I had to be told about. And the first encounter that I had with God was the fact that he chose for my mom to give me to Thomas and Bessie Murray. I was the second child that was born out of wedlock. I have a sister that's a little over a year older than me. We had different dads. I met my mom a couple of times. I never actually met my biological dad, although I've met a number of my aunts and uncles. But when I came home from the hospital, my biological mom and my sister were living with Thomas and Bessie Murray. I was a kid that was very unhealthy. I had a severe case of asthma. And in fact, I think I kept them up many, many nights just trying to make sure I was breathing and doing well. And so I think when my biological mom decided to leave, I think I was too much for her to try to care for. And so she left, went back to her home in Ashe County and took my sister and left me with the Murrays. And so they had this very sickly child. But that was my first encounter, because once I met some of my family, I realized I would never been able to be the man that I am and do what I'm doing now if I'd have been raised either with my biological mom or my biological dad. My biological father has, I don't know how many siblings, half-siblings I have. And the whole family was like that. So God saved me. God spared me from that. God broke that cycle in my life, and so I see that. But my first encounter, I don't remember, because it was just simply he took me out of a bad situation and he placed me in a home where I was loved beyond measure. There was never a doubt in my mind that my mom and my dad loved me. And one of the things that they did, my second encounter, was another encounter I was told about, but I don't remember. There was a church in between Newton and Conover that was having a revival, and they were apparently having a healing service as well. And so my parents took me to that church, and the evangelist and the pastor and several others gathered around this little baby and prayed, and my asthma was healed. And so I don't remember that. I just know that I've been told that all my life about that event taking place. And so again, I see where there was an encounter that I had with God, that God for some reason chose to set his love on me, and I didn't deserve it. I didn't do anything to gain it. I didn't have all these gifts and abilities and talents, and yet he chose to do that. There was a third encounter when I was probably 5 or 6. I remember I was playing with some friends, and I just fell down and I couldn't walk, and I was diagnosed with an onset of early stage of polio. And so what happened again, my parents took me to the best doctor they could find, but what happened was that there would be a group of people that gathered around my bedside and they prayed. And again, God intervened. And so he set his love on me for whatever reason. I certainly don't deserve it. I certainly haven't been faithful all of my life to him and walked in holiness every step of the way, yet he chose. And I think every person in the kingdom of God, God sets his love on. So it's not just me that God set his love on. God has set his love on each and every one of you. And I think that sometimes we have to look back to see how God has worked in our life and where he's been and how he's been active. I grew up I had a great childhood. My dad was a prayer warrior. I didn't realize it when I was a kid, but we were poor, and we had a house that had a hallway that split it up. And so my dad would, in the wintertime, would put on a coat and go into a room that wasn't heated, and I could hear him praying for hours. And I was playing in the hallway. My mom was the one that read me Bible stories and sang and taught me children's songs. And when she would be cooking on a wood stove, I'd have my little army man in the floor playing, and I would hear her. She would be humming hymns and doing those kinds of things. And so it was a great experience. It was a really good experience. She's the one that taught me to believe that with God I could do anything he calls me to do. And I think that I found out over the years as I've looked back that her prayers were much stronger than mine. Because she told me that she wanted me to either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a preacher, and you see what I'm doing now, and I didn't want to be either three, so I think her prayers were much stronger than mine. And she never got to see that. And I regret that she didn't get to see that side of my life. But growing up in Newton was fun. We moved quite a bit because they would want to move up to better houses because they rented all the time. But I really didn't realize that I was... that we were poor, I guess, until I started to school, you know. And then it wasn't, I just realized that there's something different. Because when you grow up in that home, you think everybody's home's like that. I was very sheltered and very protected. I think they lived in a bit of fear that my mom might come back at some point and get me. And so I can't remember when they told me that I was adopted. I don't ever remember not knowing that I was adopted. I don't ever remember not knowing that there was a God. I don't ever remember not knowing about Jesus. I mean, that's the kind of home I grew up in. My dad learned to read so he could read his Bible. He had to work in the cotton fields. He actually was in World War I and World War II, one of those rare guys that fit in that criteria. I think he lied about his age to get in World War I, to be honest with you, and then he was drafted into II. He was disabled in the military, and so he never really worked. He was always at home. He drew a VA pension and his Social Security disability, and so my mom supplemented the income by keeping children every now and then, and it was, like I said, it was a good home. I didn't really lack for anything, and we spent a lot of time out playing. You know, we did all the things kids do back in those days. We played hide and go seek. We played tag. We'd wrestle around. We got on our bikes and chased the fog machine, and now they tell you that you're going to die the next day if you do that. You know, we did all that kind of stuff, and it was good. But, you know, we're also shaped by the events that take place in our childhood. And I remember I was trying to think, you know, about some of this the other day, and I remember in Newton they had the Old Soldiers' Day reunion parade, and that was a big event in Newton. And I can to this day remember where we were. It was a very, very crowded time. I was about 7 or 8 at the time, and we were walking up to get ready to see the parade. Like I said, it was a big crowd, and there was this big black gentleman who came through, and for some reason he was trying to work his way through, and he shoved my mom, and I was behind there, and that had a very negative impact on me because I don't think my dad saw it, but I remember at that moment making up my mind that nobody would ever do that to my family. You know, nobody was going to push my family around. And then growing up in a poor home, every now and then they'd have to borrow money from the local loan shop business. And I remember sometimes I'd have to take the money. They just asked me to take the money back in there. And I realized probably when I was about 11 or 12 that there were people that would take advantage of people who had less education than they did. And again, that shaped some of my early life because I said, that's not going to happen to me. If I have to outthink, if I have to outtalk, or if I have to outfight, I'll do it, whatever it takes. And so I grew up with a mindset that you don't back down. Whatever happens, it doesn't matter how many there are. It doesn't matter what the outcome is going to be. You just don't back down. And so that was the way I was thinking for a long time. When I was about 17 or 18, my mom wanted me to go to church. I think it was Mother's Day. And she wanted me to go to church with her. And we went to a little church in the east side of Newton. It's a little independent Baptist church. C.P. Buff was the pastor. He was a bivocational pastor. We often went to his churches because he'd come and give us a ride because we never had a vehicle. And so we're in church, and I can't remember the sermon, okay? I hadn't been in a long time. When I got old enough to not go, I chose not to go. And I don't know but I remember that I came under conviction. I didn't know what it was, Okay, I didn't understand what conviction was. And I'm feeling this something going on inside of me. And I'm feeling like drawn down to the altar. And I'm trying to think, you know, so I'm holding on. It's what I call white knuckle time. Okay, I'm holding on to the back of the pew. I am not going to go down there. Because what you would not probably believe about me, but I was an extremely shy kid. Okay, I'm not going to be the guy that's out in front of anything. I'm going to be the guy standing on the sides, watching it all, you know, taking it in. I wasn't going to be in front of anybody. And so I'm really struggling with this thing, and I don't understand it, and I'm kind of scared, and I don't know what's happening to me. And I think the guy meant well at first, but I think he was probably a deacon in the church, and he saw what was going on, and he kind of walked over, and he said, you know, son, you need to go down. And again, as I said, being extremely shy, okay, I didn't want to do that, and I just said, no, sir, just very softly. And the man said, son, you need to go down. And people were kind of beginning to look back, and whatever the Spirit was doing, it died. And I said, no, sir, I'm not going to do that. And I don't know what he was thinking, but he grabbed me by the arm, and he said, son, you're going down. By that time, everybody's looking. And I looked back at him, and I said, mister, if you don't take your hand off me, I'm going to knock you across this pew. And he turned, and he walked back. He walked away from me and told me that I was doomed for hell, that there was no way I'd ever be saved. And I didn't go to church for 10 years. And so I don't push people. You know, that's why we wait sometimes several years for children to come down, even after they've made professions of faith, because I don't think you push people. I think it is the Spirit of God that leads people into salvation, and you don't drag them to the altar. And so I had a bad encounter. And like I said, I didn't go back for a long time. But it seemed like any time there was an encounter with the Lord, my mom was involved in it. When I surprised everybody that knew me and went to college, because I was not a good student. I didn't enjoy school. I simply went to school so I could play baseball and basketball. That was my primary reason. I was not a good student. If they would have tested you back in that time, I probably had ADD, because I just had a hard time focusing, had a hard time retaining things when I read. And so, but I decided that I really felt like that I needed to go to school. I was accepted back at Pembroke State University. At that time, it's UNCP now. And went to school. They took me, dropped me off, because we didn't have a car. One of my friends took me down there, dropped me off, and I was there until the semester was over, you know. But that was okay. I met some people that came from up in this way, and I'd catch a ride every now and then with them back and forth. The summer before my senior year, my mom developed colon cancer. And they took her to the University of Chapel Hill. My aunt, who was the most godly woman I know, went with her and stayed the whole time she was down there. And so I took care of my dad. He had become disabled by this time. He'd had a severe stroke. He was recovering. When I guess it was my freshman year in college, I came home one day and there was a note that said, you need to call your aunt right away when you get home. I called my aunt, and my aunt told me that my dad had a stroke and that my mom had given up the house and that she was living with her, and I would have to find some place to stay. And so that was really hard. And I had to get a truck and move all of our stuff into storage, get some friends to do that. And that's when I had a friend, Terry Gilbert, that he and I went to high school together, went to college together, worked at the lumberyard together in the summers. And he asked his parents if I could come live with them, and they said yes. And so they became my foster parents. And actually, Carrie and Andrew's more like their grandparents, because both of my parents had died by the time they came along. And so God, again, put me into a good situation with some really good people that were good Christian people that just took me in for no reason. They didn't really know me. And they took me in and were very, very good and kind and gracious. But anyway, when my mom developed colon cancer, I moved back in with my dad to help take care of him. And I was at the lumberyard one day. It was during the summer, and There's a lady named Doris Hurley. She's a kind of short lady, and she's about as wide as she was tall. And she came out. She was the secretary, and I saw her, and she was pointing like this and just doing like that. And so I came up because I realized she was talking to me. And I came up, and she said, "You need to go home. They need you to come to the hospital right away." So I went home, and I was taking a shower. And again, I'm not a Christian yet. Okay, I grew up in a Christian home. I knew all about God, but I'd never surrendered. But yet, when I was in the shower, I remember just an awareness that the Lord told me that my mom had died. And so when my cousin came, she said, "You want me to drive?" We got my dad, loaded him into the car, and I said, "No." I said, "There's no need to do that." I said, "She's already gone." And sure enough, she had. I never asked the time to see if it was the exact time because I didn't need affirmation. I understood what had taken place there. And so we just took our time and went down to Chapel Hill, brought my aunt home. That was a very difficult time. So I empathize with people when they lose their parents because for me it was a very devastating time because I had a disabled dad that somebody had to take care of. I was 1 year away from graduating, and I remember we were at the cemetery in Newton behind the recreation department. And Fred Thompson, I'd known Fred Thompson most of my life. He was just, to me, the greatest guy around. He is my spiritual father. And he would always, every time I'd see him, no matter what was going on, he was kind and loving and respectful. And I hold him in very high esteem. I don't think I hold anybody higher. And so he did the funeral. And I remember sitting there in the cemetery and thinking, what are we going to do? I mean, my mom was the one that held the family together. She was the glue. My dad had, like I said, had a severe stroke. She had gotten him to where he was walking with the walker and was almost ready to put down the walker. I mean, she'd massage his legs. She'd do all the things that needed to be done and took very good care of him. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to go back to school. How am I going to take care of him? And all those kinds of things, plus the devastation of the fact that she had died. And Fred, and this is where I had the first where I was aware of an encounter with God. Fred began to read, "I'll lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore." There was a sense of peace that I had no idea how this was going to work out. But I just knew that God was going to handle this. And so when we got home from the cemetery, two of my cousins came up to the house. My mom and my dad were living down in the little mountain area close to Maiden, next to all of my mom's family. And they said, "We want you to go back to school. We want you to finish your education. We will take care of your dad during the day. During the week, we'll make sure that he's fed. We'll take care of all that. You'll have to come in on weekends and buy his groceries. You'll have to come in early if he has to go to a doctor's appointment. You'll have to do those things, but we'll take care of the rest of it." And so I was able to go back to school. And it was an amazing thing how God worked that out. It was that same summer, about a month. I think my mom died in May, and it was about a month. It was in July I met Sharon. And we started dating and never stopped. And God blessed me again by bringing someone in my life that loved him, and it has really been the one who supported me through all this. Sharon was a Christian, and she worried about my soul. And she did what I would tell people they should not do. She was unequally yoked for a period of time. She married a guy that was not a Christian, even though I grew up in a Christian home and didn't probably, if you'd asked me if I was a Christian, I'd probably said, yeah. I grew up in a Christian home. But we started we actually had a new director of social services to show you how God works in our lives, who came in, and I really liked this guy. I respected him. His name was Bobby Boyd. And we happened to be, of all places, in the men's room one day. And he said, "Where's a good church?" And I said, well, if I was going to go, I'd go to Calvary. And he said, well, why don't you? Yeah, boom. And so we tried a couple churches. We went to Calvary, and we just loved it there. And as you know the story, but I was feeling conviction again for the second time in my life. And I understood more about what was going on. And so, but I had this thing, I didn't want to be baptized. I don't know why I didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to be baptized. I was going to get into Keene without doing it God's way, okay? I mean, I was determined to do that. And so I'm bargaining with God, okay? I'm feeling the white knuckle time again. I said, okay, Lord, and you've heard this, but I'll tell it again. Lord, if you want me to go down, if you want me to be baptized, if you want me to join this church, then we'll sing one more stanza. We never sang in the second stanza. Sometimes we didn't sing all 4 stanzas there, you know. And what does he do? Fred said, I just feel like for some reason today that we need to sing just one more stanza. When you bargain with God, you better keep your end of the bargain, right? And so I must not have been the only person that was doing that, because 3 families joined that same Sunday, you know. And Sharon, I think I shocked her because I said, let's go. And she said, what? You know, where are you going? Let's go down. We're going down. And I had to tell her what had happened. And so it didn't take long for God to bless us at that church. I think I'd been there for about a year when I was elected a deacon. Of course, they asked me the same thing that most small Baptist churches ask you when you join. Can you sing in the choir? Can you teach Sunday school? And I said, I can't sing in the choir. And they said, well, here. And they gave me the youth. I mean, I knew all the Bible stories and stuff, but I was not well-versed in Scripture. Like I told you, I hated reading anything, so I didn't really read my Bible. I just knew the story from what my mom had told me. And so here I am, and I get into the youth class, and who's in there but Fred Thompson? Both of his sons are in there, you know, who knew more about it than I did. And I thought, how crazy was that for them sticking me in there? You know, but it worked out well because I learned from them and they learned from me, and I had a desire that started in my heart to really, really know God and to understand his word. And so God blessed. I was also a pretty ambitious guy. I started out as a part-time employee at Catawba County Social Services back when there was a big recession going on. And so I took a seated job, had no benefits, and didn't pay a whole lot, but it was at least I had a job. And so I worked my way up from being a part-time employee to beginning to being a supervisor over adult Medicaid, over food stamps, issuance, certification, all of the whole food stamp program, over the paternity and support unit, over a girl that did Section 8 housing, and she also had AFDC, so I had to learn the Aid to Families with Dependent Children program, which I never could figure out why they gave that to me because they already had a supervisor over that unit. But I had all of that, and God was blessing, and I learned to apply biblical principles. Let me tell you, they work at work. And so I applied those principles: treat others as you want to be treated. You know, if you ask your people to work over, you show up and you work with them. You know, you're there in the ditches. And I had a great group of people, and I enjoyed working there, but I wanted to be a director of social services. That was my dream job. And so I applied for one in all places, Ashe County. And I knew some people that were affiliated with that, and I found out that I came in second, that they had just hired a new county director, county health director, and so they had hired from outside the county, and the commissioners got a lot of flack over that, so they decided to promote from within. And so I said, okay, you know, that's okay. I mean, I'm second's good, okay? It's better than not being considered at all. Well, one day I happened to check the bulletin board at work, and I saw that there was a job for the Chief of Medicaid Eligibility in Raleigh. Now, I was on a committee, show you how God works all this stuff out. I was been selected to be a part of a committee that went once a month to Raleigh and worked with these people. And so I knew the person that was doing the hiring. I knew that division pretty well. And so I decided I was going to apply for the job. Well, the problem was that day was the deadline to send in a resume. Now, you got to remember, back in these days, back in the early 80s, there was no computers, okay? Before many of you were born, there were no computers and none of that stuff. And so I went home, and at lunch, I did a handwritten resume. A handwritten resume. Now, I just read an email I sent to Eddie recently, and I still leave out words when I write because I think faster than I write. Anything that I write that you read in the newsletter, Sharon's proofed it. I'm just telling you, if I send it out raw, you're going to go, what is that? What does it mean by that? Because the bad thing is that I will read the words in there that I meant to be in there even though they're not in there, okay? So she has to do that. And so I sent this, so who knows what that resume looked like? But I sent it in, and they called me for an interview. And so I said, okay, I'll come down. So I went to Raleigh, had the interview. It went well, but then the lady that was the current chief that was moving up to assistant director said, well, we're thinking about promoting from within, so would you consider coming down and being a consultant? And I remember sitting there, and I said, why would I want to work for somebody when I can have them working for me? No, I'm appreciate it. Thanks for the interview. No, I'm not interested. If I can't be the chief, I don't want to be any of it. You know, I'm in a good situation where I'm at. So then they called me a couple of days later and offered me the job, but I felt like that Sharon and I had prayed about it. We put a figure in our mind, and we said, okay, if this is what they have to offer us to move. Raleigh's more expensive than Newton. This is what they have to offer us, and they offered me less. And so I said, look, I'm sorry, Sharon and I prayed about it. I have to have this much. It wasn't tons less, but I just said, I have to have this much. And they said, well, you know, we'll give you that. We'll give you a raise in 3 months when you come. I said, no, I got to move my family. We're expecting our first child. No, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Thanks for offering me the job, but I can't do it. And so I hung up, and I really felt discouraged about that. And then I had my college roommate called me, and he said, hey, if they want you, they'll come up with that. That's not a big deal. 2 days later, they called me and offered me more than what I'd asked for. And so I told Sharon, I said, I got to go. We got to go. And so I was not the most popular guy with Sharon's mom because she was pregnant with this young lady sitting over here, and I'm taking her first grandchild, and I'm moving her 3 hours away to Raleigh. And so Margaret was not thrilled with me for a while, and I understand that. But we went down there. And I remember it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. My supervisor, who had been in my job, who took the assistant director job, had a nervous breakdown. And she was hospitalized for several weeks and out of work for about 6. 2 of the top employees left for other positions. And so here I am learning a new program, which is entirely different from what we did in the county, with the task of making the Division of Medical Assistants popular in the county because they were not very popular because they were not very good at what they did, to be honest with you. And I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so I'd go home, and I think it's probably 2 or 3 weeks into the job, maybe a month. And Sharon and I would go for a walk because she was, like I said, expecting. And I said, Sharon, I'm so sorry that I brought us down here. I said, this is not working. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, Gary, she said, God brought us down here and he will give you everything you need to do what needs to be done. And everything changed. Everything changed with that. And the whole thing turned around, and it was a great, great job. I had worked there for about 5 years. And I mean, I was really in a good position. I had a good job. If I wanted to go to meetings out of state, I could go. If I wanted to send staff, I could send staff. We, as I said, turned it around, and we were, the more popular. There was a competition really between Division of Social Services and Division of Medical Assistants, and I applied some of the principles I learned from Bobby Boyd, and the thing was the customer scheme. When people call you, you call them back that same day. We just were courteous with people. And so it really turned things around. But I began to be unhappy. And I applied for another job. In fact, the retiring director of Cabarrus County asked me would I apply for her position. And so I applied for the job. And I found out again I came in second. You know, the person that came in first, I would have hired him before I'd hired me. He had experience. He had a portfolio. I didn't know what a portfolio was. He had all these clippings of all the stuff he had done in the small county that he'd been in their local newspaper. And I thought, man, I would have been impressed by that too. You know, so I didn't feel bad about it, but I still felt like that there was something that needed to change. And so I'm praying and I'm thinking. And I had to go to a meeting in Greensboro, and I was praying. And I said something like this: Lord, I don't know what's going on. I should be the happiest guy in the world. I got a great job. I got a beautiful wife that loves me and is faithful to me and supports me. I've got a beautiful child. Andrew wasn't even thought of at the time, you know, and I should be happy. I mean, I'm the vice chairman of the deacons at Fellowship. I'm the vice chairman of the budget committee. You know, we've worked with the youth. I mean, anything that was going on, we were involved in. We rose quickly. It felt like, I don't know if you've ever felt like this, but it felt like I was just being pushed down. I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And so I'm going, maybe I'm doing too much. Do I need to back off? Is that what you want? No. Well, there was a church plant that they were starting. So do you want me to join this church plant? No relief. Sharon wanted to do lay renewals. I wasn't as thrilled on doing that as she was. I said, do you want us to do lay renewals? No. And so I said, Lord, something's got to go happen because I'm just absolutely miserable. And so I said, do you want me to preach? And it's like the whole pressure left. And I said, I didn't mean that. I don't want to do that. That is not what I want to do. So I went on to the meeting, and as it would be, one person I met with was Gertha Saunders. Many of you know Daryl Saunders, who was at Oak Ridge for a good while. She had worked for me at Social Services, so I told them kind of what was going on, and she was all excited. She said, I knew God was going to use you in some way like that. And then I got back to work, and I called Fred Thompson, and he said, have you told Sharon? And I said, are you crazy? No, I haven't told her. He said, you need to tell her now. And so I went home, and I told her, and she said, I can't see you doing that. And she gets mad when I don't tell the whole story. She said, I can't see you doing that because I still didn't like to read. I didn't like to study. That I would do, you know, I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be playing ball of some kind. I wanted to be doing something, but I certainly didn't want to be sitting behind a desk studying and reading. And so she said, Gary, you don't like to study. You don't even like to do this kind of stuff. I said, I know. And so she said, what if I don't feel called? And I said, if you don't feel called, then I must have missed it. And so it took her about 8 months. And she said one day, we need to do this. We need to do this. And she just told me recently kind of what was going on there. She said that she was praying, and two of our very, very close friends at Fellowship, we called them Mr. and Miss Fellowship. They were the dynamic duo. They sang. They did all this stuff. I mean, they did everything that I couldn't do. I was a better softball player than him, though. But anyway, they had divorced. And Sharon said as she was praying about it, the Lord said, he simply wants to serve me. Are you going to stand in the way of that? And she said, no. And so we started. I quit my job, started seminary full time at age 37. Walked in there and I see all these kids in their 20s. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? You know. But God blessed. We were at Southeastern at a very difficult time. Southeastern had been a very much moderate school. The conservatives were taking over, and so it was a divided campus. It was not a fun place to be. I don't have great memories of great camaraderie between all the students because there wasn't that. A lot of students wore yellow ribbons for if they were moderate. Some wore red ribbons. I wore no ribbon. I wanted to get in there and get out so I could do what I needed to do. I do have some good friends from there, but it was not a fun time. It was a much better time when Carrie went there and with a unified seminary. But we got our first job, and we'd had a house that we put on the market, and it had not sold, and we took it off the market. And the first week I went to White Level, we were still living in Raleigh, and I got back on a Wednesday night, and they called us and said our house had sold. And so when God was ready to sell it, he sold the house, you know. And the market wasn't any better than it was when we had tried to sell it before. So again, we continuously see God doing things in our life and throughout our life. You know, he had blessed, by that time, he had blessed us with Andrew, and I had the great opportunity of one summer, the first summer that Andrew was born, of actually staying home and keeping Carrie and Andrew and really getting to know my son. Because most of my work was done at night. I was going a lot at night, meeting with committee meetings and visitation and things like that with the church. I had one day during the week was office time, and the rest of the time most of it was meetings and stuff that was done at night. And so that was a great time in our life. Carrie got to experience seminary before she was even old enough to go, and she went with me, and I dropped her off at the daycare there. I think I took her to class a couple times, and she got scared to death once or twice by some of the professors, but it was all good. I knew, though, when I went to White Level, we were there 6.5 years, but I knew that I was not going to be there forever. And there were several opportunities for us to go other places. None of them worked out. One was in Rocky Mount, one was in Greensboro. On both occasions, we just said, we don't think this is it. The hardest one was when they asked me to come back to Fellowship, which was the church where I felt God call. And it was ready to go. It was almost a done deal. And I told Sharon, I said, every time I go down there, I feel like I'm getting hung. Not because we didn't love the people, because I was not the guy for that job. I remember, many of you know Jackie and Johnny Cockrell that have been here. I remember when I went down, because I met with the committee, because I wanted to tell them face to face that I wanted to take my name out. And I mean, the next Sunday, they were going to bring me up for a vote. And I remember us holding hands and praying in a circle, and there was a puddle of tears on where the chair was, where Johnny had been standing, where he'd been crying that whole time. It was very difficult. But then God brought us here, and he's been faithful. We came into, as Randall talked about last time, a church that had been divided. J.T. Klein did a great job, but it was still divided in many ways. And to be quite honest with you, the first 10 years we spent just trying to bring unity and harmony and love. We saw great people from both perspectives. There was also some people here that were very difficult to deal with, as many of you know. And there were many times that I would walk from my office here at the church, going up to the parsonage when we lived there at that time, and say, God, can I do anything else? Will you release me? I said, I'll even sell cars, and I never wanted to sell cars, you know. But God did not do that, and I'm grateful that he did not answer that prayer in the way that I was praying it, because we see now the fruit of a long ministry that God has blessed us, and we have a very mature, a very loving, and a very good church that's on the move for the kingdom of God. And so following God isn't always easy. It can be very difficult. But when you stay there, when you hang in there, it is very rewarding, because I look around and I see Tanner here tonight, and I remember when Tanner was born. And I just absolutely cherish the fact that I see him growing into such a strong, mature man. And it thrills me almost as much as it does to see Carrie when she comes up here to sing, to see Tanner every Sunday over there on those drums, because he's one of mine. You see, and I can look around, and many of your kids, and they're mine, you know, and I treat them like mine, and they know that. And you know, and if I need to call them down, I'll call them down, but I don't have to ever call them down, because they know I will, you know. But it's a great bunch of kids that we have here. It's a great bunch of people that God has assembled. So I know it's time to finish this up. And so let me just say that I am so grateful that you have allowed us to be here these 22 years. It was not always easy, but it has been very, very rewarding. You are a very kind, a very loving, a very faithful church. I've been fortunate that for those whole 22 years to work with these two guys. And they have been a very much a blessing. You don't know how many times that I've called them up on Eddie Reese sometimes on a Thursday or a Friday, say, hey, I want to use this song for the invitation. And both of these guys have adapted. You know, they are the easiest bunch of guys I could possibly work with. Yeah, but it is good. And so what I want to say, and just kind of close this out and say, look, God chose to set his love on me because God chose to set his love on me. Not for any ability, any talent, any reason that I had. The same is true for you. God chooses to set his love on you because he chooses to love you. You may not be a great singer. You may not be great at anything, because I don't see myself great at anything. But what happens is that the Lord still loves you. And as we are obedient to him, and as we yield to him, then his plan unfolds to us. And what we find is that the most joy in life is being in his presence, of simply knowing that this God who loves us really does love us, and then wants us to go out and love everybody else and share that love. And so God's had to do a lot of work in my life. He's had to break some serious attitudes that I've had. You know, the greatest evidence in my life of the power of God is that God broke me to the point that I love. Because if somebody did something wrong, I didn't hate them. I just didn't have anything to do with them. But God said to me very clearly one time, if you want to love your wife and if you want to love your children and you want to love me with all your heart, you got to forgive your mom, because I had a lot of bitterness in my mom for leaving me. And so I had to let go of that. I had to confess that. And then he said, and so I thought I was good. You know, have you ever been that way where you think, man, I'm good. I got this done. It's all clear. Everything's smooth. Well, I had a baseball coach that I didn't like either. He had not treated me very fairly. And I could be sitting here laughing and talking, and he would come by and my whole countenance would change. And he said, you got to forgive him too. And I said, okay, well, I'll never see him again. Well, guess what? We just had a 50th reunion of our high school baseball championship. And who do you think sat at our table? I mean, he was sitting with his wife, and Sharon and I came in, and he comes walking over, and he sits down, and he says, hey, Murray, tell me about what's been going on in your life. And I just laughed, you know, because God does that. And I'd long since forgiven him, so it wasn't an issue, but I just thought it was cool how God worked that out. And so we had a nice conversation, and everything was well. Don't let anything separate you from the love of God. Satan can't separate you, but you can allow things in your life to separate you from him. Don't let any hurt, don't let any heartache, don't let any bitterness, don't let any resentment, don't let any way that somebody has disappointed you or failed you or let you down separate you from the love that God has for you. Because when you do it God's way, you can be the least talented guy in the kingdom and still experience the love and the power and the grace of God in overwhelming ways. Let me pray and we'll sing. Father, thank you for this time that we could come and just share this testimony. Thank you for this group that's come out. Thank you for just allowing me that great privilege of honoring you tonight, Lord, as I do believe that you, for some reason, chose to love me. I have no idea why you did that, because I certainly haven't always been faithful. I'm certainly not the most gifted preacher. I'm not the most talented guy in the world. But you, even before I was born, set your love upon me. I think maybe there's someone here that needs to know that you've set your love upon them. Their life may not be turning out what they think it's going to be. There may be all kinds of struggles, all kinds of pain, all kinds of, wow, I can't believe this is happening to me. But God, that does not change the fact that you have not set your love on them, and that you will not help them overcome whatever it is that they're facing if they will surrender to you and if they'll do it your way. And so, God, there may not be anybody that needs to come to this altar tonight, but if there's one that simply needs to come and say, oh, God, I need you to help me. I need you to help me make clarity of my life. I need you to help me understand what it is that you want me to do. Then, oh, God, may they feel free to come and find the help and the hope and the joy that they need. Be honored now as we sing this song, Jesus. For it's in your name I pray. Amen.
Let's stand as we sing.
Sweetly, Lord, have we heard thee calling, come, follow me. And we see where thy footprints falling lead us to thee. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. Though they lead o'er the cold dark mountains, seeking his sheep, or along by Siloam's fountains, helping the weak. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. If they lead through the temple holy, preaching the word, or in homes of the poor and lowly, serving the Lord. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. Then at last, when on high he sees us, our journey done, we will rest where the steps of Jesus end at his throne. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go.
As always, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, Carrie, that you could be here tonight as well. You know, one of the things I think is so important about a church family is how we just kind of take each other together and we love one another. And we certainly owe a debt of gratitude to you guys. Carrie was a sophomore when we moved up here, so it wasn't quite the same experience for her as it was for Andrew. But, you know, there were some times we struggled with Andrew. But you prayed him through. And I'm so fortunate that Carrie is so active and involved with her church and her women's ministry and even teaches at the seminary on occasion women that are going to be pastors' wives. Andrew's working with really kids that come from all kinds of broken homes, and they've recognized in him his love for God, and he's over their Bible studies at that place. And so family is important. Church family is important. Raising kids in a family is important. As we shared with some of you not long ago, Andrew called his mom all upset because they took their kids to a church for Bible school, and he said, "Where are all the men? There are only women there. When I went to Bible school, we had men active involved." Guys, know that your presence is seen, and it influences you being there, being involved, helping with the courses, helping with the kids. Make a difference in their lives. Don't ever underestimate how important what you do here is. Thank you guys. And then the ladies too, but thank you guys for being so faithful in your attendance. David, will you pray for us as we end?